And I think the key here also is also to realize that a lot of the great things that a lot of authors write today are actually already taught to us in the Quran and Sunnah, but we don't realize the value behind it.
ولو أن أهل القرى آمنوا واتقوا لفتحنا عليهم بركات من السماء والأرض.
Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, dear brothers and sisters. Welcome to another episode of the Barakah Effect podcast. So I'm excited about today because we are going to do another book review. I think this book is the most quoted book by Akhi Faisal in the podcast.
By me, yeah.
Yeah, I think. Okay, it is titled Good to Great by Jim Collins. Powerful title. I think it's overused today, right?
It's very overused. You're right, man.
Yeah.
I somehow suspect people even forgot that it's from a book, because it's used everywhere, Subhanallah.
True. So, brother, I always wanted to read this book, but however, when I start reading a sample on Kindle, and when I read the book, I think I was overwhelmed by the terms, the word, the sentence used in the book. It's quite difficult for me to understand. I think to myself, so I can resonate with this book. So I think I just put it aside and read another book. So maybe I will read it another time. Who knows? After today's book review, I start reading the book.
Okay, inshallah. See what I can do.
Let's hear it. So, brother, I wonder why you choose this book.
Okay, mashallah. So I chose this book, Good to Great, for two reasons. First of all, because actually after reading this book from to the end, it's opened my mind about a lot of ideas about how we can achieve greatness. So this is how typically people choose their books, right? They don't necessarily choose the books because it's technically superior in any way. Normally they choose that they consider that the favorite books because it impacted their life. So this book actually impacted in my life also in a lot of ways. It actually, in a way that it opened up a lot of perspective on some important characteristics that we should do in our life. So like a lot of them, actually, they are already taught in Islam. But when this book shows that there are business benefits to doing in the long run, there are tangible benefits, then you realize that, wow, there's a huge wisdom why Allah tells us to do certain things. So I think that's the thing that kind of like, wow, this is like a sort of like an awakening for me, Interesting, it's actually a business book, but a lot of the lessons are very practical in many aspects of our life. In many ways, people don't expect. People think like, when we talk about like public listed companies, people think like, oh, the stuff that they do there, I can't really resonate that. I think that's kind of the feeling that you got, right? After you read the sample, right? Yeah, actually, I went through that.
The result, the outcome, the money, right?
The money, yeah. I got that same feeling as you as well. I think when the sample, it's the beginning part of the book, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'll get to that. Inshallah. So that's reason number one. Like it opened up my mind about what it takes to achieve greatness, and it resonates with me a lot in terms of my career. So I don't know if I shared this in previous episodes, but when I divide my career, like so far as we speak right now, it's about 14 years of my career. The first 7 years, they were sluggish. I don't know what I was doing. I was struggling. It was difficult times. I was being like an underperformer. I was sort of being rejected to the other departments. But then something happened, and the next 7 years, like one achievement happened after the other. I got this certification, that certification, then good performance, and like a lot of breakthroughs happened. So I'm not saying that that's great per se. I'm not claiming myself to be great, but there are a lot of themes that I can see, like when I relate this to like this, what is written in this book, like, oh, okay, like I can draw some parallels. And so, it resonates with me on a personal level. So that's the first reason. And I think another one I chose this book for reviewing inside the Barakah Effect podcast is to help summarize the lessons for people so that you can implement it in your life. It's a big book, yeah, and it's how many pages is this? So this is about, if you don't count it's about maybe 250 pages if you count the appendices. It's quite a big one. It's quite a thick book, right? It's the hard copy.
250. It's a big book and small font, right?
That's right. The font is very small.
Yeah, it's very small.
Right.
Oh, inshallah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's and being a non-fiction business book, I can understand that a lot of people probably don't really want to read it. It's difficult for people to have the patience to read it from start to finish, right? They probably don't have that much interest in reading unless you already enjoy reading non-fiction business books, which interestingly, I'll talk a bit about myself. I actually don't read business books. Right?
Yeah, did anyone recommend the book to you?
Actually,
Or-
yeah, someone did. There was one leader in my company last time. So they were like having a conversation with him and saying that, what do you recommend to read? So this is the first book that he quoted, and that happened a few years ago. So I bought the book, but I didn't actually read it. So it was on my shelf for a while until COVID came. Then I started to read the book. So during COVID times, they're like, oh, it's so spring cleaning, and okay, think it's about time. I can't go out anyway. So I might as well read the book. Yeah, so actually there's a bit side note about me. Reading was a habit that I only started from COVID actually. So it's only been about less than 3 years actually now. Yeah, just a side note. Yeah, so actually that's the reason why I hope that I want to summarize these key learnings. So even if you don't read the book from you don't buy and read it, at least you can get some key learnings and actually apply it in your lives, the practical aspects of it lah.
Okay, Akhi,
Yeah.
one thing interests me.
Yeah.
You tell us that you're not a reader, but you have this reading habit started from COVID. So can you tell us about how you developed the reading habits?
Okay, that's a really good question. I think I would propose we have a dedicated discussion on that because there were a lot of things actually behind the scenes. One of the earliest books that I started to read when I started this reading habit was actually Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, and also another book called Slight Edge. So these books emphasize the idea about how to build habits. So when it start, so that inspired me. Okay, start to read a bit. So I implemented some aspects of those small but consistent kind of habits. Okay, what compelled me at the time? There was a very strong personal motive why I wanted to read this book in particular, Good to Great, because the concept of the book is about, okay, the author speaks about this book saying that it's not about, okay, the focus of the book is about these public listed companies, these very big companies, right? Fortune 500 companies and so on. But he says it's not about Fortune 500 businesses. It's about how to build great organizations. So when I read that really like caught my attention, because at that time we were about to start the Barakah Effect, right? We were in discussion behind the scenes around 2020, right? So I thought, okay, if we're going to start something, I want to start right. So I wanted to use this book sort of to give some ideas. So that was the one agenda. And in my professional life, I was like in this transition mode, like I was going to pursue the path of becoming a technical manager. So like, oh yeah, if I'm going to lead a small team. This is technically the building blocks of an organization, right? So I want to have some ideas. And since people recommend this book so much, like, okay, let's have some ideas. Like start on the right foot. So like, okay, if ever there was a time to start kickstart a good habit, okay, then now is the time to do it. So kind of have to challenge myself out of my comfort zone a bit lah.
Subhanallah. Okay, wait. Actually, what's the book about? It seems like it's talking about business,
Right,
leadership.
right.
Oh, are we getting there?
Yeah. Okay.
So
okay, very good.
What's the approach of this book? Is it business or leadership or?
Okay, very
Tell
good.
us, Akhi.
Yeah, sure, inshallah. Yeah, I think I'm jumbling up the point. So I'll start with the basics, what the book is about. Okay. The book is about, okay, although the author itself, you'll see the name Jim Collins, but actually it's a collective effort actually. He's got a team of about 20 people. So if you open the earlier pages, you'll see a picture of the entire team there. And it was actually about 5 years of research actually. A lot.
You mean that this book is a research? I mean, they research it themselves, it's not a secondary.
Correct. Yeah, it's not through an educational institution and they don't outsource it. So like it's as if this team was formed for this book. This is the outcome of that research project, which is quite amazing. And it's about 15,000 hours. That's what he quoted inside the book. 15,000 of research. So if you kind of divide like 20 people, one work week is about 40 hours. So that's like working full time for 6 full months, doing nothing else, right? 20 people for 6 months just to create this book here. So they did it and they tried to research like the public listed companies, and they wanted to see basically like, okay, actually this book is like a follow up to Built to Last. That was his first book. So Built to Last is like, it's about how like enduring organizations, how to build long enduring organizations. So then somebody challenged him and said, these concepts are useless because these companies are already great. So Jim Collins, he was like, oh, okay, so that's a good question. Why don't I research companies which are like, they were from good, like kind of like just average, mediocre, and then suddenly like they exploded. So that drove him to do this research. So what he wanted to do was to find companies that were like, okay, they're just normal performers, and then suddenly they got like a great return and they sustain that great return for 15 years. That's a long time, yeah, 15 years. Why they don't? Because he doesn't want to get like companies who like flash off the pan, like, oh, really, really good returns, and then just sort of died out. So he spoke a bit about that. So all these,
like most of the company now, right?
yeah, you have this huge startup, right? Then they explode like millions and sort of died out, right? So he wants to remove that. So he looks at like these companies. So these companies have like so okay, these are the terms that maybe some of you are not familiar with, even I'm not familiar with. So the cumulative stock returns are about 7 times or 6.9 times greater than the general market. So if let's say like if you invest in a certain company, you get say $100, but with these great companies, you'll get 6.9 times of that. So you get $690 instead. So it's huge, and that sustains for like 15 years. So that's sort of the standard that he put. It must be like that. Yeah. So the idea is like he filtered out all these Fortune 500 companies, and these are all public listed companies, by the way. Yeah? So these are very very high profile companies, and he came down to 11 companies. From all that, just 11 companies. So these are what he calls the good to great companies. Some of these companies you might not have heard of it, like they are very American based. So you have I'll just mention some names. I think the familiar names that you'll know are Gillette. I think you know Gillette, right? The razor blade.
Yeah.
Kimberly-Clark. I think you know that. That's toiletries. You have some of those. Interestingly, Philip Morris is one of them. Philip Morris. Yeah. And then you have Wells Fargo, the banking institution. And then the rest probably haven't heard, like Abbott, Circuit City, Walgreens. Yeah, these are, if you're not from America, you probably haven't heard of them. Now, here's an interesting one. Right? So I quote from his intro. He said they were actually surprised by these 11 companies because these 11 companies did not include companies which they expected to be in the list. And one of them is GE. So GE did not make the good to great list. Amazing, huh? So Coca-Cola is not there. Intel is also not there. Oh, so they themselves were surprised. Huh? I expected these to be
Coca-Cola is not there?
Yeah, Coca-Cola is not there also.
Oh,
didn't meet the good to great.
Wow.
Yeah, big surprise. It did not meet the good to great criteria. So that's very interesting. So that's why it uncovered a lot of very interesting points.
So they are good, not great.
So for whatever reason, maybe they didn't sustain, or maybe they didn't. The grade was not as great as they set the very high standards. And by the way, just a side note, like what as you said, actually I don't read a lot of business books. So on average, since I started the reading habit about COVID, I read about 20 books a year, maybe. Do you read that much? Like, or do you read less or more?
Around that, yeah.
Oh, okay, so about the same pace, huh? So yeah, I think about from 20 books, I think maybe like less than 5 business books. I don't read it much. I don't really have that much interest. I would say that I'm quite financially illiterate. I have very poor knowledge of business acumen. I don't know how stock market works. Ideas about investment. All these. Oh, you too, huh? So
yeah,
a lot of these financial terms, they sound like foreign language to me. You might as well speak German because it means the same to me. So I want to tell this because I want to tell the listeners and yourself also, Aziz, that I didn't come to this already being familiar with these terms. I'm also like you. I'm also like just a casual kind of reader. And so a lot of these terms, I kind of like, it was difficult for me at first, actually. So yeah, I'll speak a bit about that, like the reading approach thing. But yeah, that's basically what the approach of the book is. But I think the interesting thing is like, he says he wants to remove any biases. So they didn't come with any like preconceived notions or like ideas that they wanted to fit in. They were like, why it took so long? Because they just looked for patterns. They had no idea what made these companies great. So they didn't like, I think must be the leadership because leadership is like this. They didn't start that way. They like look at the patterns. So I like that part. That is a very research based. So the engineer side of me appreciate that. The non-biased part. So the engineer part of me appreciate that. Like, okay. So you come in with like total, like no bias, like just observe data. That's a cool part, right?
Like it's a white blank paper. It's not like they approach it. Okay, we check the leadership. What are the characteristics of the people in the organization?
Correct. And then what I like about the approach as well is that they also have this thing called comparison companies. So you have the 11 good to great companies, and then you have the comparison companies. So it's like the comparison companies are like the equivalent of that company, but they didn't reach the great point. So they're just kind of like good or just, like average. So when they highlight a good to great characteristic, they will see how these comparison companies perform. This is important because I'll share about how these ideas impacted me, because they like to contrast this. Like, for example, good to great companies, they do X. On the other hand, the comparison companies, they do Y. I like that part. So you can sort of contrast this. So if I don't do this, that's the consequence. That's the application part that we can benefit from.
Okay, before we go to the ideas of the book, so why don't we speak about the writing style? Because you read the whole book.
Yep.
I hope that you can debunk my judgment that I have for the book. It's hard to understand. I think it's because I just read the sample.
Okay, very good. So actually, to be honest with you, for me to read this book initially, it took a long time because the intro, I felt like that, like exactly how you felt. It's like, hey, this is a bit overwhelming because, okay, that's kind of like my sort of critique of the book. So he starts the book with explaining the process. And that kind of is a bit tiring, you know?
Okay.
So like the talk about process, the terms, you're like,
Okay.
oh, can we
You should put it the last page.
so he learned from this. So he actually wrote another book called Great by Choice. I think you heard about this book, right? Great by
Okay.
Choice.
Yeah, I have the book.
Oh, you have the book?
I haven't read. I
mashallah.
haven't read it.
Oh, okay. I just finished reading it
Yeah.
a couple of months ago. He learned from this. So Great by Choice, he put all the methodology in the appendix. so Great by Choice.
Okay.
So Great by Choice, he starts with the story and he straightway goes to like, okay, these are the principles, A, B, C. Like, oh, so you like,
Subhanallah.
it's more engaging. Yeah.
Yeah, he implement his concept. He's going from good to great.
That's,
Subhanallah.
mashallah. Well put, man. Yeah, actually, I felt that also. Okay, just for the record, I've read 3 books by Jim Collins. So I've read this one, Good to Great, Great by Choice, and also Built to Last. Okay, the thing about Built to Last, right? It's actually his first book, and I actually read Built to Last before Good to Great, but I didn't finish Built to Last. So
Oh.
okay, on one hand, Built to Last, actually the ideas are fantastic. Some of the ideas there are even more mind-blowing than Good to Great. But on the other hand, it's a bit more dry and a bit too technical. So I couldn't bring myself to finish it. Well, you're human beings, right? So in Good to Great, he kind of enhanced that writing style. So he kind of made it more engaging. He added more storytelling aspects to it. But of course, I mean, there's still some technicalities here and there. But so what I learned was that once you get past the intro, once you actually start the first chapter, and the first chapter is awesome. It's about level 5 leadership. Oh, that one really blew my mind. So once that grabbed me, I'm like, okay, tell me more. Now I'm interested. So I think I would recommend to people, if you really want to get to the meat of the book, just start like reading level 5 leadership first. And then once the ideas are like, start to like, once you get the momentum and the feel of it, then you can sort of look back again and say like, oh, okay, so this is the approach that he got to reach here. Because once you get to level 5 leadership, we're like, huh? Because the finding is a bit like, it's kind of like totally unexpected. So I'll speak a bit about that later. But yeah, so I think the idea is like, it just takes a while to take off.
Oh, okay. You meaning that the intro is like a test. Are you committed or not?
You can say that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he talks a bit too much about the methodology. So I think even you're an engineer, right? Aziz? Sometimes you see like some of these technical
Yes.
reports, they speak so much about basis, assumptions, methodology. You're like, come on, get to the get to the idea, right? So yeah, same thing as well. We're human beings, even though we're engineers, still sometimes that drags down sometimes.
Yeah. But actually it's important, right, to mention our methodology, how we get the data, the research, the patterns. But that's the boring part.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I think you're right. For technical report, it's true, but I think for a book part, probably you want to probably like cater to the audience more. So maybe it's a slightly different approach. But I think one thing I really like about Jim Collins' style is that he always comes up with very unique kind of terms. So like when you compare to other business books, they kind of have like very common terms, but he always like comes up with ideas that if you hear it, this must come from Jim Collins. Like level 5 leadership, I've never heard anyone speak about this, And then things in his book, he speaks about this thing called hedgehog concept. Nobody's like hedgehog, like what, Sonic or what,
Yeah.
Sonic
the Hedgehog.
And then he has this thing called Flywheel. Like nobody speaks about this, but when he explains it, I'm like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. So even like in the book Great by Choice, he has very like unique terms. I think he calls it the Great by Choice, there's this thing called the 20-mile march. So like when you hear the 20-mile march, it's come from this book. So I think that's the interesting part about his approach. He has unique themes.
I think we are heading to the meat of the discussion, right? So,
Inshallah.
Akhi, what are the ideas of the book?
Mashallah. Okay, so I'll start with summary first, because I'm not going to touch everything because that might take too much time. So okay, basically, I'll try to put up the graph here, the picture of how the summary looks like. So he comes up with 3 basic themes. If you want to go from good to great, how do you apply this? So it can be in anything of your life. It can be your business, it can be your career, it can even be something like your personal kind of ambition. Maybe in your parenting, you feel like, oh, you could do better, right? So something like that. So you feel like, oh, like you're kind of average. So how you want to break through? So how you want to break through that success? It comes down to 3 different foundations. It's about being disciplined in the people, disciplined in thought, and disciplined in action. So that's how he categorizes it. And then disciplined people, he breaks it down to what he calls level 5 leadership. So this is a really big thing. I'm going to speak a bit about this. Okay, so I won't talk about it now. Okay, the disciplined people part, he emphasizes another one, which is called first who, then what. Okay, this one is quite interesting. So he talks like how good to great companies, they spend a lot of time making sure they get the right people on the bus. This is another term that he likes to use very uniquely, get the right people on the bus. So his concept is that if it doesn't fit with your values, your principles, your vision, get them off the bus. So it's interesting, like he's saying like how the good to great companies, they're kind of relentless in a sense where if they feel you're not a good fit, they'll kind of get rid of you quickly. No harm, no hard feelings, to the point where I think one or two good to great companies, I think the CEO even fired his own brother. Something like that. Your own brother,
That's rare.
Yeah, that's rare, right? But that shows how committed they are, how ferociously committed they are. So that's the aspect about disciplined people. Okay, then you have disciplined thought. Okay, disciplined thought, that means the mindsets lah, the disciplined mindsets. So this one is broken down to two. It's confront the brutal facts. Oh, I love this one. I'll speak a bit this later. Another one is called the hedgehog concept. Hedgehog concept is quite interesting. I'm not really going to speak much about it in this episode, but I just want to share what it's about. We spoke about it, I think, in our episode called about career, was it?
Episode, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
I think,
Yeah.
Slum, I think.
Probably, yeah. The slum. I think the other one was the I hate my job. There's one. I think there's one. Finding passion in what we do. Okay, so the hedgehog concept is like talking about how these good to great companies, they always have these 3 elements. So it's like focusing on what they are good at, what they can be with the best in the world, like not good at, not just good. Good is the enemy of great. So that mean what they can be great at and what can be the best in the world. Second, what they are passionate about. And third is that what can be their basic income generators. So they always have these 3 elements. So how we can relate to that? Sometimes we may be good at something, but we're not passionate about it, right? So that will not get you to the great. That might get you good. I mean, you're good at it, right? You get income, but the passion will not fuel you to go far. Likewise, if you're really great at something and you also, if you're great at something and you're passionate about it, but it doesn't generate your livelihood, it's also unsustainable. So you need all these 3 elements. So that's how the hedgehog concept works. So, and I think it's interesting why he's called it the hedgehog, because he compares a hedgehog and a fox. So I think it's like a Greek kind of story. So like a fox is very smart, he's very cunning, he's very sly. He like whatever you tries to do, he tries to one up you. You try to do A, he will do A to beat you. If you do B, he'll do B to beat you. But the hedgehog, he's like, he can't really do much. He's just got spikes on his back. So if you do something, he'll just crawl. He just do one thing. So he brings the hedgehog idea is like, you're not great at many things. You're really great at a few things. So just really focus on those few things only. So people say like, oh, you should diversify this. No, I'm not. That's not my thing. That's not what I can be best in the world at. That means what these good to great companies do, like they consciously take the effort. Like if I can't really be great at this, I don't want to spend too much time doing it. So I think I can relate a lot to that. Like sometimes we tend to do everything, right?
True. Especially engineers.
Yeah, we try to do too much, right? Kind of like jack of all trades, master of none. But this idea is like just be a master of a few things and just double down and be great at that. So that's about the hedgehog concept. And the last one is like disciplined action. This one I relate to less, but it's still quite important. So he's talking about the culture of discipline. So he's talking about like how these good to great companies, they have this consistent discipline where you don't really have to micromanage or motivate them because you already got the right people on the bus. You're already having the discipline mindsets with the hedgehog. So the discipline is already there. So it's kind of like it works like clockwork lah. So that's the summary of the topic. And then it talks about technology accelerators, focusing like how like these companies, they don't use technology as the tip of the spear, but when the technology comes, it enhances what they already have. So that's kind of the theme of it.
Okay.
But the best part of it is the flywheel. So okay, the disciplined people is like, okay, like that. Then we go to great. So it's about the flywheel. Okay, I'll speak a bit about the flywheel after this. But yeah, that's basically the summary of the whole theme. I have four ideas that impacted me the most. So the first one is like what you said, the first opening statement: good is the enemy of great. Like, whoa, this guy,
Oh.
whoa, this guy means business, man.
Mm.
So yeah, I'll quote from the book. He says, okay, good is the enemy of great. Key reasons why we have so little that become great. Why? So he explains further. We don't have great schools because we have good schools.
Good
Hmm.
school.
Interesting, eh? We don't have great government because we have a good government. Huh. Right? So interesting, right? So
Yeah.
then he makes a point.
Interesting, yeah.
Few people attain great lives because it's easy to settle for a good life. Wow, that's so cool, right? Like, it was like, I have a good life. But yeah, that's it, right? You just settle down for that. So that's why he said majority of the companies never become great. In fact, the vast majority become quite good. And that's the problem. Oh, this is what he said. That's the problem. Because you're okay with being quite good. So there he starts to say, if you want to make the leap to become great, so the idea, the theme behind it is that if you really want to break that barrier, if you really want to break that stagnation, you have to make a deliberate, hard choice. And there's a price to pay, and you have to stick to that goal and stick to landing. That's the idea behind it. Because it's easier to say it's good enough. That's the first thing that struck me. I won't speak much. I think that's basically it. But yeah, that really like jumps in your face, this theme here. Yeah. Okay. So that's number one. Number two, this is my favorite aspect. So he talks about level 5 leadership. So I think you know the answer, Aziz, but I'm just gonna ask anyway. I don't know if you remember or not, or even if you don't, you can just pause for dramatic effect so that our audiences can guess. Right. So let's give a pop
I
quiz.
don't think I can remember.
Oh, you remember? All right, let's do this again. All right, Bismillah. Okay. What do you think is the number one most prominent distinguishing characteristic of level 5 leaders? What's the most important leadership characteristic?
Usually people talk about, when we talk about leadership, it's
Yeah.
about the leader have a vision. He's a visionary.
Visionary. That's what I put in number
Yeah.
one choice. But it's not correct. Okay. Second choice. Second attempt. I'll give you 3 attempts. Okay, so it's not visionary.
Not visionary, yeah. What about it's not responsible, it's accountability.
Accountability. I got that also in my option list, but that's not correct. Okay, one more try. Good. Visionary, accountability.
What
Yep,
about
very good.
what about respect? How to say?
Respect, huh?
It's not respect. It's like, yeah, charismatic. People are respect people with charisma, right? So charismatic.
Okay, I got that here. So charismatic is actually option number 2, but it's not. Okay, so you said visionary, accountability, characteristic is not. So okay, brace yourself, wear your seatbelts. The number one characteristic of level 5 leaders is that they are humble and modest. What? What's going on, right?
Humble.
Okay, so that's the thing, right? So even Jim Collins
It's
is
not
like,
charismatic,
it's
because
not
we always imagine a leader is like, oh yeah, with his charisma, his confidence, right?
right. In fact, he says
You
this in
do
the
what
book.
I do.
Yeah. In fact, he says in the book. I quote what he says. He said, okay, compared to high-profile leaders with big personalities who make headlines and become celebrities, the good to great leaders, on the other hand, seem to have come from Mars, like just a completely different planet. They're self-effacing, quiet, reserved, even shy. Huh?
Bro,
You read that?
I think I can relate with it. If you ever saw the list of 15 billionaire in Malaysia, right? Most of them we don't know who they are.
They're
They
not like
usually are
public
not in the-
figures.
Yeah, they don't always do press conference or anything, right?
Yeah. That's one way of reading it. Yeah, true. So yeah, this is what he says. Okay, these leaders are a paradoxical blend of personal humility, but and professional will. So it's not just being humble, but they have a very strong will. But the point is, like the first impression is that you see they're very humble and modest. So they say, so Jim Collins writes, he's like more like the kind of the person like Lincoln is. It's interesting, like when they do the interviews about these good to great companies, whenever people describe their leaders on these good to great companies, they'll always describe their leaders with using words like quiet, humble, modest, reserved, shy, mild-mannered. You know, like when we think about high profile Fortune 500 CEOs, these things will never come to mind, right? So this is
true.
right. So I think this is quite mind blowing. I think this is something that when I first read, so that's the one that grabbed me. I'm like, oh, really, for real, this guy. so so that's why, like, that's what really caught my attention to read more. So I quote from the book. This is what he says. He says, the good to great leaders never wanted to become larger than life heroes. They never aspired to be put on a pedestal or become unreachable icons. They were seemingly ordinary people quietly producing extraordinary results. Ah, cool, kan?
Oh,
It's just
mashallah.
yeah. So when I read this,
Very
I'm like,
cool.
yeah. When I read this, I was like,
Super
oh,
cool,
this is so
subhanallah.
motivating, man. I can relate to this. I don't have to be that larger on life, on stage, TED Talk kind of guy, right?
Yeah, true. Because when, yeah, even any company, when they talk about leadership, they have this course about leadership, they have briefing talks about leadership. It's always about, charismatic, accountability.
Accountability,
You must
yeah.
have a vision.
Vision.
I think it's not rare. I think never talk about being humble.
Right,
It's
yeah,
quite
that's
rare.
right. It's never
Yeah.
spoken about because, like what you said, like visionary, accountability, charisma, like all those have their importance, no
Yep.
doubt. But you're right. The focus of character, humility, it's like almost never heard of, right? So I think, okay, I think
For a
the
leader.
readers, I think the listeners are like, "Hey, what does humility have to do with all this?" Okay, so here's the point, right? The point is, why is humility so important? So he says that the good to great leaders, they refuse to take credit for their company's success. Now you see, this is the humble part. They always attribute their good fortune to having great colleagues, successors, and predecessors. They always say like, oh, the guy before me, laid out foundation well. They always like praise other people. So because they refuse to take credit for themselves, that's why they're always working. That's why they're always going, improving themselves. They never look at themselves like, oh, because of me. So when you have like what's the contrast of humility? What's the opposite of humility?
Arrogant.
Arrogance, exactly. Kibber, right? So when you kibber, you're like,
Exactly.
I'm the man. Who you guys, lousy lah. So like if you do that, then that kind of blocks your own personal capacity for growth. So that's how you want to relate the humility aspect and how it improves not just you, but as a leader, that will improve your whole company actually. So that's how it's related actually. So this is quite interesting. So he says that the level 5 leaders, they always like credit people outside. Okay, but here's the point. So getting to your point about accountability, right? Now, so this is what Jim Collins calls the window and the mirror. So when good things happen, they will look out the window. They will say, oh, it's because of Aziz, it's because of market conditions. They will always talk about external circumstance. But when something goes wrong, they will look in the mirror. They will take responsibility. That's interesting. They will be accountable for it. They will not blame bad luck when things go poorly. So this is the opposite of the comparison companies. Just now I spoke about good to great and comparison, right? The comparison companies were opposite. Like these, sometimes they might have good leaders. They might have quite good leaders who achieve great results, but they always kind of like attribute themselves. There's a bit of a what's the term for it? Self-centeredness to it, And then when something goes wrong, they're always like, markets like this, our shareholders, they don't understand. They start to blame people when things go bad. But the good to great leaders is opposite. When good things happen, they'll blame other people. They will attribute other people. And when bad things happen, okay, it's my responsibility. What can I do about it? So that's the interesting aspect. So the comparison company CEOs, they are the ones that you mentioned just now. These are the characteristics, the typical CEO. So this I quote from the book. He says they are the typically egocentric rock star CEOs. So these are the ones. So so yeah, I find this really mind-blowing. And I think that's okay, but here's another point. He says, I quote from the book. He says that it's important to grasp that level 5 leadership is not just about humility and modesty. It's about ferocious resolve and a stoic determination to do whatever needs to be done to make the company great. I quote some more. He says, level 5 leaders are fanatically driven, infected with an incurable need to produce results. They will sell the mills for fire they will sell the mills or fire their brother. Just now we spoke about firing their brother, if that's what it takes to make the company great. So that's why it's interesting. It's like a duality. They are modest and willful, humble and fearless. That's what level 5 is. And this is a very rare blend, right? I think this is very inspiring because like people, when they talk about one side of it, people think like if you have one, you don't have the other. So for example, right, this is the typical part. When you look at somebody who's humble or quiet, you say, this guy is unambitious, this guy is timid, this guy is weak. Right? People have that kind of perception. On the other hand, when you're somebody who has strong will, very ambitious, people say, oh, this guy is arrogant, stubborn, or self-centered. You know what I mean? Like it's either one, right? But here, level 5 leaders, you're humble and you have strong will. Cool, man. I think I love this part.
Cool.
Level 5. Whew, this is my favorite lesson. Because why is it so fascinating? Because our Prophet ﷺ was like this. Did you realize that? Like, if you look at his demeanor, he was the most
Mhm.
humble person, right?
Yeah.
He said, like, whoever who shows humility, Allah will elevate him. In fact, the companions used to say what? The Prophet ﷺ was shyer than a virgin behind a veil. That's how shy the Prophet ﷺ was, his character. But when the time comes to make decision, like he's very serious, very firm. Like when something bad happens, he'll be the first one in the front lines on the battlefield. He'll be the bravest person. Ali radiallahu anhu, we know Ali, who is Ali bin Abi Talib, right? Among the greatest mujahideen, right? He used to say that the Prophet ﷺ would always be in the front lines. And then we would, when the battle would get tough, we would seek refuge behind him, behind the Prophet ﷺ. Can you imagine that? That's the character that he had. One time they say that there was some noise happening in Medina, and then the Sahaba went to investigate. So people were like a bit scared, like, hey, what's going on? Like somebody's going to attack us or what? So when one of the companions opened the doors just to check out, just to attend to the noise, they saw the Prophet ﷺ already running out on a horse with a sword. He said, "Don't worry, everything's fine." Whoa, look at that. See that? The forceful leader he is. Yet at home, he's the shyest person. Look at that. Like, wow, like what kind of leader is this, So when I read this, I'm like, wow, this is amazing. Like this is the kind of level 5 leadership that we don't have these days, right? So yeah, I think this is something that I find really relatable. It's taught to us in our Seerah. But what I find really fascinating about this book is that Jim Collins, he says that there's a black box in level 5 leadership, is that we don't know how they become humble. So he says like a lot of CEOs, they're from the farm or they're from outside town, but we don't know. So interesting, right? Like, so he doesn't really have solutions. Like we don't know, they don't actually know how to nurture this. So he's just saying that this is just an observation they make. If you cannot force humility. This is something already inside. So what I find is so fascinating because us in Islam teaches us how to be humble, right?
Yeah.
So that's the amazing part. So Islam has the solution to how to be a great level 5 leader. Wow, I was like, oh, I love this, man. This is the best part of Good to Great because Good to Great outlines how important this is. Because I mean, who would have thought, right? Who would have thought that being humble is the key to becoming a Good to Great company? I'm like, what? I cannot see the relationship at all. But this book makes that connection, and then our Quran and Sunnah teaches us how to be humble, right? The Quran always reminds us things and teaches us how to be humble. So I think that's fascinating, and when you relate that doing this actually brings a lot of dunya benefits. Yeah, so this is the lesson.
The level 5 leader, whatever he makes, whatever he do is for the cause of the company, not for himself, right?
Yep, correct. Yep. Yeah, I forgot to make that point.
Just like us, if you want to do da'wah or anything for the deen, it's for the deen. It's not
for the deen.
to make yourself famous or
correct. Okay. Yeah, that's the level 5 thing. So yeah, that's the best part. This is my favorite aspect, the idea that impacted me the most. Okay, so that was number 2. So now go to number 3. So the idea that impacted me the most, the third one, is the idea called confront the brutal facts. That's why he calls it. So the Good to Great companies, they had one thing in common. They will always confront the brutal facts. So whenever like market trends start to shift, they see like their product is going to be a failure, they're not going to be in denial, like, no, it's okay, don't worry, we got this under control. They're not like that. They're like, okay, it's gonna go down. What do we do next? So some of them will go like take very drastic actions and say, okay, we'll no longer sell this product. They will actually do that. A lot of comparison companies, they kind of have this ego thing. They kind of like, oh, that defines us, so we don't want to let go. You know what I mean?
Like
exactly.
Nokia, Kodak.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Precisely. They don't want to confront that brutal facts kind of thing, So yeah, this is what they do. So I think one interesting one, just to quote one of the CEOs from another Good to Great company called Pitney Bowes, if I pronounce this correctly. So he said, okay, my job as a leader is, how like in the forest, how you have rocks, right? If you open the rocks, what do you see? Have you lifted any of those rocks before, Aziz?
Which rock?
Like, in the forest, right? You have these big stones, right?
Yeah.
Have you lifted any of those stones before?
Oh, of course.
Okay, what do you normally see?
Full of insects, right?
Right, full of insects, right? Full of squiggly things. So people say like, don't lift it, I don't want to see it. But actually it's there, right? So people are like, if you sit down there, that there's squiggly things down there. But if you open it, like, I don't want to sit there anymore. But it's already there in the first place, right? So one of the leaders said, my job as a leader is to open and look at those squiggly things, I quote, even if what you see will scare the hell out of you. That's what he says.
Ooh.
Yeah, so he has that courage. So yeah, you don't like it, but that's our job. Like, it's not nice to see. I mean, I don't like to see squiggly things also, right? But that's the reality now. Now we
Yeah.
can confront it. Now he knows what to do, Yeah, interesting.
But usually we always patch something on top of. Right.
Right, exactly. So that's exactly what I've seen. What happens a lot when people have this. They don't want to hear red reporting. They're like, hey, come on, just what can we do to make it green? Not say what can we do to make it green, but they don't want to see the reds. They are kind of like in denial. They want everything to be green. So if you want to have the good to great characteristic, you need to embrace the red. That's the idea. So one of the interesting, it's difficult. It's not easy. Yeah, so one of the good to great companies, what they will do is like in their sales meetings. So I quote from the book. It says the sales meeting were not the kind of like a sales conference. They say like, oh yeah, we did this. This is our achievement in quarter this one. Our profits are this one. They say for this good to great company, they're not like that. Their sales conference, they will challenge each other, they will question each other, even their regular workers will stand up against their senior executives. They will tell the senior executive what you are doing wrong, that kind of thing. Like that's the environment of the good to great company. Yeah, rare, right?
That's rare. I never heard of it.
Right, never heard of it. Right?
Never been in a company. I think I work with 4, 5 different company now. Never heard of it.
Woo, there you go.
Oh,
there you go.
You think you can talk back to the senior executive? Oh, bye-bye.
Wow, there you go, right?
Bye-bye.
Yeah, that's the kind of perception that we have, right? Yeah, but that's what I say. The good to great companies are not like that. They create a psychological safety that allows people to speak and allows people to hear these kind of uncomfortable things. Why? So that they can do something about it. So that's the idea. And I think this alludes to another favorite subject of mine, like personal favorite subject of mine. It's called psychological safety. So this is talking like if you want to have good to great leadership characteristics, you need to try to, and so this influences a lot in the way I lead and manage. I try to always remember this. Try to create an environment that allows people to speak up, even if what they speak is not going to make you very happy. So you can apply this in many different ways. You can apply this at your workplace. You can apply this in your parenting also. Sometimes children say very nasty things, right? I think you. sometimes. Today alone, how many times, huh?
Yeah.
And our temptation as parents is like, shut up, who you don't know what you're talking about, that kind of thing, right?
I'm your father.
Yeah, I am your father, right? That kind of thing, right? But the idea about being good to great is just listen, just confront it, right? And then, be calm about it, and then tackle the problem step by step. So I think this is something actually we learn from the Prophet ﷺ, right? This is his leadership approach. You see how he talked, how the hypocrites used to speak to him, how the Jews used to speak to him. Yeah. Very, very insulting, right? Very disrespectful, right? But still he will listen. No matter how bad the hate speech, how terrible, and he always had the courage to look them in the eye and meet them face to face. For us, some guy will say something, I don't want to meet this guy, I always try to avoid him, right? So I find this very, very powerful, this lesson here. Like I can find so many ways we can apply this actually. Like, I think something like, for example, how I apply this, if people are underperforming, people are not doing something, right? Have a conversation with them. Try to uncover why. Instead of, but don't ask why, why sounds like interrogating, So I try to use a more curiosity-based approach, try, say, hey, help me understand a bit. What happened here? Then eventually they tell you the why, indirectly. So that's one way. And another one is like, okay, when people are angry or emotional, just hold the fort, just listen. Because actually when they are venting out, you might hear something that you normally don't. And that's new information that can help you do your job better. Yeah, so I like that. So I think it's like in engineering, we call it risk assessment. Do you do risk assessment in your workplace?
Me, no.
Oh, you don't? Okay. Yeah, for us in process engineers, we do this a lot. We like hazard risk assessment. So this hazard assessment, they'll talk about what's the worst that can happen. Talk about this leak, fire, explosion, fatality. It sounds like, so serious, don't know, kan. No, we're not like that. No, you talk about it.
How frequent it will.
How frequent. Exactly. And then when you do that, you're like, okay, what can we do? Okay, these are the mitigation measures. You'll outline A, B, C. Okay, this will reduce the risk by this much. Is that enough? See, you're more productive, right? As opposed to saying, hey, hola, Aziz, don't say fire lah, choy, touch wood. If you do that, people say that, right? Which is, by the way, it's a shirk thing, right? To say touch wood, but yeah, you get my point, right? So if you say like that, then you will not you will not do something about it. So I think this is there are a lot of people, a lot of applications I can see for this. Like for example, difficult conversations. We as Malaysians, we are we like to avoid difficult conversations. If we see people we don't really like, or we have a deadline that we owe them something, if we see them messaging us, we don't want to open their message, But the idea about good to great, confront it, right? Don't avoid it. A child tantrums, we spoke about this. Okay, here's the important point. As Muslims, confront the brutal facts about your death and your akhirah.
Don't
This
talk
is the
about
one.
death lah, right?
Don't lah bro, I tengah makan kot. I biar lah enjoy my food. As people still say like that, right?
Yeah.
If you do that, then you're not really going to embrace the reality. The idea is when you have that, then you're going to prepare for your akhirah. So that's why the Prophet even said, right? The wisest believers are those who remember death often and prepare for it best with their good deeds. That's the wisest people. So the wisdom here, the wisdom that the Prophet ﷺ speaks about, is a good to great characteristic. So it's interesting, right? Like these things are already taught to us in religion, but the authors now are uncovering that you have this basic foundation of confronting brutal facts. It will make your business to turn from good to great. I'm like, wow, like that's amazing, man. You know what I mean? Like
Amazing.
it's a perspective that we never saw, right, in our deen. Yeah, so that's the takeaway point. Well, I think I'm taking a bit too much time, but okay. I'm getting very excited here. Okay, the other one is about the flywheel. So the next idea that impacted me most about the book is the flywheel. Okay, so the flywheel is about this. So it's a flywheel, a quote from the book, is something like this very huge mechanism that is turning and turning and turning. So imagine this huge mechanism. The momentum is very big. So you want to make the first rotation, you require a lot of force. Right? But you put a lot of force and it just turns a little bit. So it's like this axle is about 30 feet in diameter. Can you imagine? Like it's like 10 meters in diameter. It's like 2 feet thick and it weighs like 5,000 pounds. So 5,000 pounds is like 2 tons. Huge, right? So you want to make it, the first turn is like so much force. You just turn a little bit, right? So like a lot of force to turn a little bit. And then once you have one rotation, the force that you require is less. Right? And you have more movement. As time goes by, you require less force and you get more movement, right? You start turning, and then you require less and less force, and then the force becomes less and less, and suddenly you get the momentum, and then it just keeps going and going and going, and the momentum of that huge flywheel will just keep on turning itself. Okay, can you picture that in your mind?
Yeah. It's like when you drive a car, when you stop on a red light, when it's turned green, it would take time, right, to accelerate. I mean, to move.
The effort. Yeah. Sort of like that. Yeah. So that's the idea behind these good to great companies. So I just quote from the book. It says that a lot of these good to great companies, like you don't see them coming out of nowhere. Suddenly they just explode. So a lot of people say, I never knew about this company. So I can't remember which company. One of them, they're like, they never were featured in Fortune magazine at all. Fortune magazine almost never acknowledged their existence. And then suddenly they're like, really like become this huge thing, like, oh, they came out of nowhere. But what Jim Collins says is actually, if you study their business reports, actually they've already been doing the same great practices all along. It's just that the results are not there yet. You understand? So that's the flywheel part. The first part, you might not see results. It will be like, you're just another company, nothing much about you. But what these companies do, they just keep at it. It's a good practice, right? Keep going. The results might not see yet, just keep going. And then we'll reach a tipping point and boom, huge. That's what happened, right? So this is what they said. I'm just going to quote the summary of this chapter. It says, okay, this is in contrast to a lot of comparison companies and a lot of what we see today. We think that if you want to solve a problem, you have to do this huge revolution, change, change CEO. The initiative here, reorganization, right? Fire this boss. Change the what? PM, right? Change the prime minister. People have this mindset, right? If you do something drastic, then things will change. This is not the characteristic of good to great company. So that's the interesting point. I think, oh yeah, that changes. Like I can see this a lot. Like, in our workplace, people think like that, right? If something doesn't work, just change everything, start from the ground up. This is
reorganize.
Yeah, reorganize, restructure. fire this guy, put this guy in, and so on, right? But good to great, good to great companies, they will stick the landing. They will continue doing what they do. They will refine their approach here and there. Yeah, keep on going, keep on going. So they spend a lot of time in the beginning, which, like planning phase and all these things. And like it takes time. You don't see the results yet, right? Then you start doing it, discipline, action, stick to it, right? Discipline, stick to it, stick to it. Change leaders, stick to the vision, stick to the principle. Then the momentum starts building. See, what happens is this, right? Change leader, change policy, right? Change leader, change strategy. Happens very frequently, right? A lot of organizations. I don't want to blame anyone.
Yeah. Even nowadays, when they want to do project, they don't spend the time to really plan the project. We just use the template before, right?
Right.
And we just put more people, and then they think that it's like plus minus multiple.
Yeah.
And you can accelerate the progress. I think it's not like that.
Yeah. True. So, okay, that's a good point. Like planning, for example, right? When you do spend a lot of man hours doing planning, people are like, Aziz, you're not moving the project. Come on. Like people deliver results, Aziz, but actually that work itself is to deliver that tip of the spear, the results later. If you don't spend time doing the planning now, like doing like really maturing the ideas and the contingency ideas and all these things now, later on when you encounter problems, and then you're gonna encounter even worse consequence, right? So that's the idea about the flywheel. Like in the beginning, the things that you do on the surface, it seems like that's nothing much, but you keep at it, the results will come slowly. So okay, here's a summary of the book. He says, okay, this is quite interesting. He says, those who launch revolutions, dramatic change programs, and wrenching restructurings will almost certainly fail to make the leap from good to great. Almost certainly fail to make the leap from good to great. That's the interesting part. No matter how dramatic the end result, the good to great transformation never fell in one fell swoop. There was no single action, no grand program, no one killer innovation, no like Lucy break, no miracle moment. Okay, here's the lesson. The process is resembled relentlessly, pushing a giant heavy flywheel in one direction, turn upon turn, building momentum consistently until the point of breakthrough and beyond. It's all about consistency. So it's about being patient, being methodical, being mindful, and then out of nowhere, bang, you keep climbing and climbing. I love this point. This because a lot of things in life, you don't see the results yet. Parenting, right? Parenting, you're like, where is this going, man? Sometimes you feel like that, right? But a few years down there, oh wow, I can see what I did over the weeks, how that had an effect now. So I think that's a lot of application we can do. And actually, for me, this describes my career. Actually, as I said earlier on, the first part shows like that on the surface looks like that there's not much results, and then suddenly after the 8th year, suddenly things just come one after the other. Now it's not like those things came like just out of nowhere. Actually, the things that I've been doing before, all those things were important throughout the year 8, year 9, year 10. It's just the results were not seen yet. So all those things actually build up to that point. Actually,
I think I'm on that phase. Right
Okay. Which phase? The build up.
The build up.
Yeah. So hold on to it. It's like in the beginning, you're like, hey, where is this going, man? Like, come on, man.
That's what I feel right now. Where am I going? What I'm doing?
Gotcha.
But I think I have to keep on doing it, inshallah.
Let's hope. So I hope this concept sort of motivates you. Like just stick to your like ambition. You have some goals you want to achieve. Inshallah, like when the time comes, then the results will come. And I can relate a lot to this. Like this idea about flywheel when it comes to Seerah, for example. Like Seerah, right?
Wow.
Okay, but by the time amazing. Like look how many followers of Islam the Prophet ﷺ have when he passed away. Like do you know the magnitude of that? How many Sahaba? How many companions?
I think it's 1,000, 10,000.
More than that. When he
More.
did the
100,000.
it's around the 100,000 magnitude.
100,000. Oh, 100,000.
If I recall correctly, I didn't get to get the numbers in time for this episode, but if I recall correctly, during the Hajj, right, during the Wuquf, so the Sahaba said that the number of Sahaba who joined the Prophet ﷺ for Hajj is about more than 100,000.
100,000, yeah.
So that's those who went for Hajj, right? So maybe the volume is maybe around 200,000 or so. So that's towards the end of his life, right? So that's quite a lot of number of followers. But if you look at the rest of his life, how many followers did he have in the first 10 years? Like, right? How many years? Yeah, a handful, right? How many years was his prophethood? Prophet Sallallahu his total prophethood? 33 years, right? How many years in Makkah and Medina?
Makkah 10 years, Medina I think 13.
Makkah
Oh, opposite.
13. Makkah
Oh,
13
Makkah
years.
13.
Medina 10 years, right? Okay. How many followers did he have by the time he migrated to Medina? How many muhajirun were there? How many? Yeah. So the first 13 years, how many people in Makkah embraced Islam? Just
300?
roughly. Less than that. I think the magnitude is about 100. Imagine that.
Oh, 300.
The
300
first
is Badr. Sorry.
correct. 300 is Badr when you combine the Ansar, right? So
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
after
the answer,
Hijrah.
yeah.
So before
Mhm.
that, imagine like the first 10, 11, 12 years, 100,
Oh, just
that's it.
100. Yeah.
How did you reach 100 to 200,000 in like 10 years, right? This is the flywheel in effect. You see?
Mm.
Can you say that the first 10 years were a waste? You know what I mean?
Oh no.
Absolutely
Yeah.
not, right? You need the foundation, right? You need that iman. And in fact, those 100 people were the core. The muhajirun they were like the foundation of the sahaba in later on, right? So it was all important. So what happened? Like
But
after they migrate,
But
sorry?
if you are with the prophet with the only 100 followers, you were like, where are we going, right?
Exactly, right. Where's this going? Like after all this time,
Yeah.
just this. That's the flywheel in action. MashaAllah. Amazing. So after they moved Hijrah, then the Battle of Badr and Uhud, still not, they had quite a lot of followers. So I actually put the statistic here. So like during the Battle of Uhud, the number of estimate followers were maybe around 2,000, maybe 2,000 Muslims. So Battle of Uhud around the 15th year after prophethood. Okay, but after Hudaybiyah, that was a tipping point. So that's the one when the flywheel momentum had built. A lot of Muslims came. Remember, I think we spoke about this in one of the previous episodes, right? During the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, thousands of people became Muslim. Why? Because of the peace of the land. Because they had a peace treaty between Makkah and Medina. So that's when they could learn Islam in a peaceful environment. A lot of people became Muslim. But the real tipping point was the conquest of Makkah. So the 8th year after Hijrah, the 21 years after prophethood, 30,000 Muslims now about that. And you see now, like first 12 years or so, maybe 100, 200 followers, maybe at most. Battle of Uhud, about say 3 years later, about 2,000 followers. Conquest of Mecca, 30,000 followers. You can see it go up now. And by the Farewell Hajj, look at that, like huge exponential increase. And by the way, I'm being a geeky, the breakout, yeah. I'm being a bit geeky here. You know how like in Excel you can plot the exponential graph, right? Have you tried this before? I tried this actually. so like year 1, how many followers? Year 2, like, and then I try to, and then you can put like a line of best fit. Then Microsoft Excel can generate equation for exponential, right? You know this, right? So
No,
I
not
tried.
me.
Oh, you haven't tried it, right? Yeah. Okay. So this is what I used to do. So I did it lah. So I tried to plot, and Excel cannot come up with an equation because the exponential is too high. Like it's mathematically impossible to come up with an equation to show how exponential it is. Okay, I'm just being geeky here. But anyway, the point here is that's the flywheel in effect. So I think the lesson for us, like the life lesson for us, is this is how da'wah works. Even for us at the Barakah Effect, right? We feel like, for example, maybe we don't have many followers, subscribers. Don't worry about all that. Just keep on doing. We don't know whether Allah will add the barakah or not. Maybe this will be it, but who knows, right? Maybe one day there's one tipping point, but boom, something like huge thing will happen. We don't know. The idea about the flywheel is you have to keep going because the flywheel is very big, right? So once you stop moving, that's it. Stops moving, right? You want to start again, it's really, really difficult. So the idea is keep going, and then the momentum starts to build, and then you will explode with the results. So yeah, I think the flywheel is the best part. So if you look at the summary of good to great, the flywheel actually covers the whole spectrum. The idea is like a lot of these things when you do it, like the idea about confronting brutal facts, and even level 5 leadership. So let's say the listeners out there, right? Even you as this guy, maybe we feel like we're not quite leader level yet, right? So being like humble and forceful, you won't see the level 5 leadership results yet, right? But it's there. It's there in your results, in your work today. And then by the time the positions will come later on, it'll be more important for you to have that. But the idea is to start now. You won't see it yet. So that's the idea about momentum. Confronting the brutal facts. You might not see the results yet, but over time, the momentum builds and builds. Keep at it. Put your trust in Allah. Be patient. Be persistent. Results will come. Yeah, cool, right? I love this lesson.
Cool. SubhanAllah.
This is my favorite concept. I love this. Is in a good to great, the flywheel part.
I need to read the book.
MashaAllah. Yay, I convince you. Yeah, just a side note. You know Tim Ferriss, right? The author, very famous podcaster. He interviewed
for our work week.
For our work week, right? For our body.
For our body.
Workout.
For our body and Titans tool.
Tool of Titans, yeah.
Tool of Titans, yeah.
So he interviewed Jim Collins. And he said that his favorite theme from the book was this flywheel effect. So he spoke about this and how it has an influence on him as well as a podcaster, as a YouTuber. Like a lot of things that he does, like when you do like invest in certain things in your podcast, you don't see the results yet, but keep doing it, you keep doing it, you keep doing it, and suddenly your results will come. So yeah, this concept you can apply in many different ways. So that's why like a lot of lessons from good to great, actually it's not just about the business per se. Like there's a lot of things that you can apply. And then just now it spoke about Seerah, like who would have thought, right? Seerah has something to do with like like good to great character, right?
Yeah. Can you say that the good to great is about ihsan in everything we do?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Ultimately, it comes down to ihsan. Yeah, true. Yeah, so that's wrapping up my key ideas that impacted me the most about good to great. So I think I hope what I hope now, Aziz, that you feel like initially you thought it was a business book, right? But suddenly, like speaking about seerah, like akhlaq, and conversation, parenting, like where did this come from, right?
I thought it was about how to make your company great. Only about companies, not about individual. But when you speak about the flywheel concept, the disciplined people, disciplined thought, disciplined action, it's like, meaning that we need to start it on individual level first, right?
So that's why I like this book so much, because it kind of caught me off guard lah. When I read it, I was like thinking like, okay, think about like how to the strategies about it, but suddenly it becomes very like human development kind of lessons, So yeah, that's the best part.
Do you have anything to add?
Yep, just some closing thoughts from me. But I think the closing thoughts here is that there's a lot of very human lessons that we got from this. And at the end of the day, these human lessons, when you translate them to organizational level, then you get the good to great results. So, and it's very interesting that you reflect this very kind of human characteristics, and then it relates to something as big as Fortune 500 success. But at the end of the day, it all comes back to very human lessons. I just totally did not expect this. So I hope that what I shared today has been something beneficial. And I think the key here is also to realize that a lot of the great things that a lot of authors write today are actually already taught to us in the Quran and Sunnah, but we don't realize the value behind it. We don't realize the value of being humble, of confronting the brutal facts, the value of consistency. But yet, when you apply this in the business context, that's the ingredients of greatness. In the context of Islam, this is your elements of ihsan. So at the end of the day, this is the wisdom of Allah. He already gave you all the ingredients, and the Western authors now are uncovering it. And they, without realizing it, they're actually saying that, mashallah, the Quran and Sunnah is the best reference. To me, that's the takeaway that I take from this, that I did not expect.
Without we realizing it,
Without we realizing it, that's right. Mashallah.
I think the most surprising thing that in this review is that the level 5 leadership is one of the characteristic is being humble. It's quite alien to me. Subhanallah.
Yeah, again, so alien. Yeah, you're right.
Okay, alhamdulillah. I think we are at the end of the discussion. Jazakallahu khairan, Akhi Faisal, for the book review. It's really beneficial. I think you succeed to convince me to read this book. Inshallah. I was not consistent, not that strong to read this book. I just, as you mentioned just now, right? You have to just pass the introduction, and inshallah, everything is good there.
Right.
Okay, Jazakallah khairan. For that, I hope that the listeners benefited just as I did. And we end this session with Subhanakallah wa bihamdik, asyhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.